Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I live in a small town in northern Illinois, one of those places where the houses have more lawn than sense, and people wave at you even if they've never spoken a word to you. Last summer, around late June, we had one of those painfully sunny Saturdays where everything feels slower than it should. My wife was out of town visiting her sister in Indiana, so I had the whole weekend to myself. I remember that morning clearly because I just finished mowing the lawn, sweating through an old t-shirt, when I noticed a garage sale sign at the end of our street, neon green, taped to a cracked wooden stake like it had been reused a dozen times. I didn't recognize the name on the sign at first, but when I walked down the block and turned the corner, I saw it was being hosted by a guy named Greg. He'd moved into one of the newer houses on the other side of the cul-de-sac a few months back, kept to himself mostly, though I did lend him my ladder once when he said he needed to fix a gutter. I remember he never brought it back, so I had to walk over and ask for it a week later. Harmless guy, I thought. Kinda twitchy, always smiling a second too long. But whatever, I was bored, and I'd always had a weird soft spot for old tools and yard junk. He had everything spread out on plastic folding tables, kitchenware, books, a box full of tangled cords, and a few old drills and toolboxes that looked worn down but solid. That's when I saw them. Lined up near the back, half under a sun-bleached tarp, were three things I swear used to be mine. A battered red socket set, a rust-speckled hacksaw with duct tape around the grip, and an old Ryobi power drill with a paint chip on the side in the shape of Michigan. I knew that drill like I knew my own handwriting. I'd had it since college. And those tools, they'd gone missing about a month ago. I figured I'd misplaced them, maybe loaned them out and forgot. But now, staring at them sitting there on Greg's folding table, I knew exactly where they'd gone. I asked him where he got them, tried to sound casual, not accusatory. He looked at me with this weird little shrug and said, "Oh, those. Picked them up by the roadside. People throw away all kinds of stuff, man. Found them right by the storm drain on Maple." Then he laughed like that cleared everything up. I kept looking at the drill, and something in me just clenched. That was my damn drill. But what was I gonna do? Call the cops and tell them my neighbor maybe stole my tools but swore he found them on a curb? There were no markings, no receipts, no proof. And still, I knew. Deep down, I knew where he'd really taken them. The more I thought about it, the more it started to click. About 3 weeks earlier, we'd had one of those casual neighborhood BBQs out on the cul-de-sac. Everyone brought lawn chairs and coolers and let their kids run around barefoot, while the dads hovered around the grill pretending to know what they were doing. I'd gone inside for a bit to get more beer, and at some point, I remember Greg walking around my side yard, claiming he was looking for his dog. Said she slipped the leash and ran off somewhere. He looked jittery then too, but I didn't think anything of it. Now I was starting to think he wasn't looking for a dog. He was looking for an opening. My shed sits at the back corner of the yard, behind a row of overgrown lilacs. It's old, wood-paneled, with a padlock that I usually latch, but didn't that day because we were in and out grabbing chairs and stuff. I remember going back there that evening to get the citronella candles and noticing the door slightly cracked. I chalked it up to the wind, or maybe my son forgetting to close it right. But now, that whole timeline felt like it had been sitting there in plain sight, waiting for me to piece it together. I didn't confront him that day. I just stood there for a second too long, watching his mouth twitch as he pretended not to notice me staring at the drill. There was this faint moment where our eyes locked and he tilted his head, like he was waiting to see what I'd do. It wasn't defiant, just aware. He knew what I was thinking. He knew I knew. That was probably the worst part. That eerie little shared silence between two people who weren't saying a thing but understood everything. I turned and walked back home, fists clenched, heart pounding in a weird, slow rhythm like my body couldn't decide if it wanted to fight or run. That night, I kept replaying it in my head. His laugh, the way the tools were half hidden, the coincidence of that BBQ. I even pulled up our doorbell cam footage from that day, but of course the shed is out of frame. Around midnight I couldn't sleep, so I went outside in a hoodie and walked down the street. Greg's house was dark except for the dim blue flicker of a TV upstairs. I stood across from his driveway, watching the shadows inside his garage shift gently from the motion sensor light. That's when I noticed something weird. My old garden spade leaning up against the wall next to his recycling bin. That wasn't in the sale. He hadn't even bothered to hide it. He was keeping some of it for himself. I don't know what came over me, but I walked up his driveway. Quiet, slow steps. I just wanted to see it up close, maybe confirm it was mine, maybe see if there was anything else. The garage door wasn't fully shut. It hung a few inches off the concrete like it had jammed halfway. I crouched down and peered inside. It was cluttered but not chaotic. There were labeled bins, fishing poles, a camping tent in a black bag, and a stack of milk crates filled with miscellaneous junk. Then I saw something that made my stomach turn. My grandfather's old level. Wooden, faded green, initials burned into the handle. RLS. That level had sat in my shed untouched for years. He hadn't just taken what was visible. He'd gone through everything. I backed out slowly, trying not to make a sound. But just as I hit the sidewalk, the porch light flicked on. I froze. Greg didn't come out. He didn't even peek through the blinds. But he was awake. He'd turned it on manually. There's a slight delay with motion sensor lights, and this one snapped on like someone had hit the switch. I didn't wait. I walked home with my chest tight, that sinking realization blooming inside me. He was watching. He always had been. Not in an obvious way, but in small, creepy little glimpses. Showing up in odd places, waving a little too enthusiastically from across the street, asking weirdly specific questions about what I keep in the shed. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I told my wife everything, and she believed me, mostly. But again, no proof. Nothing I could bring to the cops that wouldn't make me sound paranoid. So I did the only thing I could. I emptied the shed, took everything of value, and locked it up with a new deadbolt and motion lights around the yard. I installed 2 more cameras, one facing the back fence, and I stopped going to neighborhood events. I see Greg sometimes jogging in the morning with his headphones in, or raking leaves like some picture-perfect suburban cliché. He always waves, that same slow, too long wave. And every time he does, I feel like he's letting me know. He remembers that I know. A few weeks later, his garage sale sign started popping up again. Different color, same handwriting. I didn't go, but I saw others wandering over, carrying coffee cups and tote bags. Some even brought their kids. I wanted to scream at them to check their sheds, check their garages, their basements, but I didn't, because deep down, I think I realized something. Greg's not just stealing tools. He's collecting little pieces of people, things they won't notice right away, things that seem minor until you spot them in the wrong hands. I still don't know how many of my things are in that house, but every time I lose something now, no matter how small, I look at his windows, and sometimes I swear I see the blinds move. I used to spend Saturday mornings hitting up yard sales with my son Wyatt. He was 6 back then, still into Pokemon cards and Hot Wheels, and I was just trying to stretch a tight budget and keep weekends fun. That morning felt like any other. It was late spring, a little overcast, and we were in a neighborhood about 15 minutes from our place in Chesterfield, Virginia. I remember the street clearly. Ridgewood Lane, big maples, tidy lawns, kids' bikes laying in driveways. The kind of place where people wave from porch swings. Wyatt was crouched near a table full of old toys, bartering like a little lawyer with a woman selling Beanie Babies, while I browsed through a rack of used books. I wasn't more than 10 feet from him. I could hear him giggling, and I wasn't worried. There were families everywhere, neighbors chatting, kids chasing each other with juice boxes. The kind of chaos that feels safe because it's familiar. I had my eye on an old Stephen King paperback when I noticed someone new in the mix. A woman, maybe late 30s, had crouched down beside Wyatt. At first glance, she looked like one of the other moms. Jeans, beige hoodie, blonde ponytail poking through the back of a faded ball cap. She smiled a lot, like she was overly friendly. The kind of smile that tries too hard. I didn't think much of it until I saw her stand up and motion for Wyatt to follow her. He hesitated, but she leaned in and said something. I didn't hear it, but I saw his face. Confused, then compliant. I started walking toward them, slow at first, still unsure if I was misunderstanding something. That's when she took his hand. Not aggressively, just casual, like a family friend would. They were already halfway down the driveway when I picked up my pace and called out, "Hey buddy, where are you going?" Wyatt stopped, but the woman didn't. Before I could reach them, a man standing near the sidewalk, maybe in his 50s, flannel shirt, thick glasses, stepped in. He looked at her and asked, "Did his dad say you could take him?" Loud and clear. The woman froze, eyes darting from him to me. She let go of Wyatt's hand without saying a word, turned and jogged across the lawn to a silver SUV idling down the block. I yelled out again, but the engine roared and the vehicle peeled off so fast it barely missed a parked truck. Wyatt looked up at me with this blank, nervous stare, like he hadn't fully processed what just happened. And I suddenly felt cold, like the world had shifted a few inches sideways. People around us started catching on that something weird had just happened. The man who stopped her turned to me and asked, "You know her?" I shook my head and crouched down next to Wyatt. He was holding the little plastic bag of toys he'd bought, still clutching it tight like he didn't want to drop it. When I asked him what she said, his answer nearly knocked the breath out of me. He said, "She told me Daddy said she could walk me to the car." And the thing is, he didn't say it like he believed her. He said it like he didn't want to get in trouble for almost believing her. That broke me a little. We ended up staying there while the police were called. A couple of the neighbors tried to remember the make of the SUV. One guy swore it was a Kia Sorento. Another said maybe a Hyundai. No one caught the plate. The woman had vanished in less than 10 seconds, like she knew exactly where she was parked and exactly how fast she had to move. One woman, older, mentioned that she thought the lady looked familiar from another garage sale the weekend before, but couldn't say for sure. The entire block had that stunned silence people get when reality doesn't match what it's supposed to be. A warm, cheerful morning had just snapped into something sharp and wrong. When the officer arrived, he took a statement from me, from the man who intervened, and a few others. He asked Wyatt if he'd ever seen the woman before. Wyatt shook his head, and then looked at me like he needed reassurance that he hadn't done anything wrong. The officer said, "It's good someone stepped in. This kind of thing, it's usually quick. Most of the time, there's no hesitation, they just go." That line stuck with me and still does, because Wyatt had hesitated. Just enough. And some stranger with sharp instincts had said the right thing at the right moment. I don't even know his name. Later that night, an officer called to follow up. He told me they ran a canvass of the neighborhood. Nobody there recognized the woman. Nobody local fit her description. They even checked some surveillance footage from a Ring camera on a nearby house. You can barely make her out. It's grainy, but you can see the SUV stop, idle, and then take off fast. Too fast. No license plate visible. The cop admitted that in most cases like this, unless something actually happens, unless the child goes missing, it rarely leads to anything concrete. She hadn't technically committed a crime, just tried to. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that woman smile. Not warm, not joyful. It was rehearsed, polished, but hollow, like she'd practiced it in the mirror until it looked just right. And the more I replayed it, the more I realized how calculated it had been. She picked a moment when I was distracted, a crowd where it wouldn't seem strange for an adult to talk to a kid, and a tone of voice that made Wyatt second-guess himself. She didn't grab him, she convinced him. That's what scares me the most. It wasn't brute force, it was strategy. After that, I started watching people differently. I stopped taking Wyatt to public yard sales unless I had someone else with me. He noticed too, asked me once, "Are you still scared of that lady?" I didn't lie. I told him yes. Not just of her, but of the idea that someone could smile at your kid and pretend to belong just enough to get away with something like that. I even printed out flyers with a basic description of her in the SUV and dropped them in a few mailboxes in that neighborhood. I never heard anything back. The man who stepped in that day, he left before I could thank him properly. Just gave me a nod and walked off with a cup of coffee like it was nothing. I hope he knows he made a difference. I think about what would have happened if he hadn't been there, if I'd looked up 5 seconds later, if Wyatt hadn't hesitated. There's no nightmare worse than the ones that almost became real, the kind that leave no scars, no trace, just a hole where something could have been taken from you forever. It's been 2 years now. Every so often, I still check news sites for any reports that match her description. Nothing ever comes up. Maybe she moved on, maybe she tried it again somewhere else. I don't know. What I do know is that people like her don't just disappear. They wait, they watch, they blend in. And the next time someone like her shows up, maybe there won't be a stranger nearby who decides to speak up. I was lucky. Wyatt was lucky. But luck shouldn't be the thing that keeps your kid from being taken. It was one of those muggy Saturdays in late June, where the sky can't make up its mind between rain and sun. I'd decided to finally clear out the garage, partly because I needed the space, and partly because my daughter Emma had been nagging me for months about getting rid of all the dad junk I'd hoarded since the 90s. So I set up a yard sale in front of my place, dragged out a couple of old folding tables, propped up my battered cooler next to a crate of vinyl records, and put a handwritten sign on the mailbox. Yard sale. Everything must go. I live in a sleepy neighborhood outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. Mostly older folks, a few families. The kind of place where everyone waves but nobody really knows your name. The first hour was slow. A retired couple wandered by to check out some fishing rods, and a woman in running shorts bought a chipped ceramic rooster for $5. Around 11:30, an old maroon sedan pulled up across the street, engine sputtering like it might just give out right there. 2 women stepped out. One was tall, maybe mid-30s, with bright orange lipstick and thick sunglasses perched high on her forehead, hair pulled back into a tight ponytail. The other was shorter, older, with a gray streak in her black hair and a habit of tapping her nails on her phone every few seconds. They looked out of place, too made up for a Saturday morning yard sale, but I figured people are weird everywhere. They crossed the street together, and the taller woman beelined straight for me, launching into questions before I could even finish my Diet Coke. She wanted to know if I had any old tools, then if I had video games, then suddenly if I'd ever heard of a certain brand of lawnmower from the 80s. She talked fast, words bouncing around from topic to topic, like she was trying to fill every bit of silence between us. I remember thinking she seemed almost rehearsed, the way she kept laughing at her own jokes and leaning in too close, like we were old friends. I only caught the other woman in my peripheral vision, moving quietly along the tables, pausing to thumb through a pile of paperbacks, and then drifting toward the side of the house. I was distracted, no way around it. The taller one had me hemmed in, pointing at an old toaster and asking about its wattage, making me dig through a box under the table for something she just had to see. I laughed and tried to keep up, not noticing until much later that her partner had slipped completely out of sight, heading around back where my patio and the sliding glass door were. It's strange how quickly your sense of security can dissolve in your own yard. When the taller woman finally decided she was all set and called out for her friend, "Janet, let's go," I looked up to see the older woman coming back around the side of the house, empty-handed and unhurried, like she'd just been admiring the flower beds. They made some small talk, thanked me for my time, and got into their sedan, which sputtered to life before puttering off down the street. I didn't think much of it right then. I just felt relieved that the weird sales pitch was over, and that I hadn't let them haggle me down on the records. It wasn't until I started gathering things to take back inside sometime after noon that I realized my phone wasn't where I'd left it, on the patio table next to the back door. My laptop, which I'd been using that morning to play music through a tinny Bluetooth speaker, was also missing. The back door was open wider than I remembered, the kind of detail you only notice once you're standing there, cursing under your breath. There was a faint smudge on the glass, right at shoulder height, and I remember my stomach doing a slow, cold flip as the obvious sank in. I called the police from my neighbor's place, hands shaking and cheeks burning with embarrassment. Officer Daly was polite, a little tired looking, but he took it seriously. He asked if I'd seen anyone acting suspicious, and I told him about the two women, how one kept me talking while the other window shopped her way around my yard. Daly asked if I'd noticed their license plate, but all I could remember was the faded Oklahoma State University sticker peeling off the sedan's bumper. They took a quick look around, jotted some notes, and told me they'd check if any of the neighbors had cameras pointed toward the street. That afternoon felt like it stretched on forever. Every time I thought about those women, I replayed the conversation in my head, trying to spot the moment I should have realized what was happening. I kept remembering the older woman's shoes, pristine white, totally out of place on our dusty sidewalks. She'd barely said a word to me. I don't know why that detail sticks, but it does. Like the sound of her nails tapping her phone, almost in rhythm with my pulse while I waited for the cops to call back. The police showed up again later that evening, this time with a younger officer named Brooks who carried a small tablet and wore sunglasses even as dusk settled in. Brooks explained that a neighbor's security camera across the street had captured just enough of the sidewalk to catch the women walking back to their car, each carrying something under their arm. The video wasn't crystal clear, but it was enough to see that one of them had my blue laptop sleeve tucked up against her chest. When I saw that little detail, something sour rose in my throat. I never thought I'd feel so exposed by something as simple as having my back door open for a breeze. Brooks asked if I wanted to come down to the station to look through some still images. "They've hit other neighborhoods," he said, almost apologetic. "Their plates trace back to a rental out of Kansas." Hearing that made the whole thing feel even more surreal, like I'd just been another name on a list, some routine stop in a much bigger string of low-stakes crimes. I remember how Brooks kept checking his watch as he talked, and how Officer Daly lingered in the background, looking over my shoulder at the grainy footage on the tablet. Even now, I can still picture the moment the car door slammed, the way the brake lights flickered as they pulled away. That night, I barely slept. Every sound from the backyard made me jump. The usual comfort of my house, the faint hum of the fridge, the creak of the old floorboard near the stairs, felt different, like the whole place had been quietly shifted when I wasn't looking. I kept seeing flashes of orange lipstick and spotless white sneakers every time I closed my eyes, as if my mind was running the footage on a loop, daring me to spot some clue I'd missed. I thought about calling Emma, but I couldn't bring myself to admit how easily I'd been played. In the days that followed, it was the little things that bothered me most. The way the back door still stuck when I tried to close it, or how quiet the house felt without music from my laptop. I changed my passwords, put new locks on the doors, even added a camera above the porch, things I never imagined I'd do in this neighborhood. But the worst part wasn't losing my stuff. It was realizing how ordinary the whole thing had been. They didn't threaten me. They didn't even hurry. It was just a well-practiced trick, and I happened to be the next target. I kept replaying that day in my mind, searching for anything I could have done differently. Should I have noticed how the taller woman never looked at the tables, only at me? Should I have called out when I saw the other one drifting past the fence? It's easy to be wise in hindsight, but at the time it all felt harmless, almost routine. I started warning my neighbors, knocking on a few doors to let them know what had happened. Most of them just shook their heads. A couple laughed it off. "Guess it's yard sale season, huh?" But I could tell it unsettled them too. Nobody wants to think someone can just walk into your home like that and slip away with your things. A week later, Officer Daly called to tell me the car had turned up at a motel 2 counties over, but the women were long gone. Apparently, this wasn't their first time. There were similar reports from neighborhoods as far away as Texas and Arkansas. Always 2 women, always a distraction and a quick grab through an open door or window. Daly said the odds of getting my laptop or phone back were pretty slim, but at least now there was a pattern, and maybe someone would recognize them. It wasn't much of a comfort, but it was something. Life eventually settled back into its usual rhythm, but it took a while for me to shake the feeling that someone might be watching, waiting for another opportunity. I caught myself double-checking every window before bed, locking the garage even if I was just going to be inside for a few minutes. Emma stopped by with a new mug and a fresh pack of batteries for the doorbell camera, telling me to trust, but verify. There's a weird kind of peace that comes with knowing you've done everything you can, even if it's not foolproof. Looking back, I still get that sinking feeling when I think about how easily it all happened. I guess that's why I'm sharing this here. If you're reading this and planning a yard sale, watch the doors, trust your gut, and don't let anyone distract you from what's happening on your own property. You never think you'll be the next story until you are. I was driving through the outskirts of Fairview, Kentucky that Saturday morning, trying to kill time before meeting an old coworker for lunch in town. I hadn't been out that way in years, and I'd forgotten how those long country roads could feel like they stretched into another world. No traffic, no buildings for miles, just faded barns and crooked mailboxes leaning into the wind. That's when I spotted the "Yard Sale Today" sign nailed to a wooden post at the corner of a gravel driveway. The kind written in thick red marker, all uneven and kind of desperate looking. I figured I had a solid hour to waste, so I slowed down and pulled in. The house was a one-story ranch-style place, all faded blue siding and sun-bleached shutters. It looked a little weather-beaten, but not abandoned. The lawn was patchy, and there was a folding table set up near the porch steps with mismatched kitchenware, old garden tools, and a few boxes of dusty DVDs. Nobody else was around except the guy standing behind the table. He looked to be in his 40s, short beard, trucker hat, wearing a threadbare flannel like he'd slept in it. He gave me a nod but didn't say much at first. The kind of seller who just lets you browse in silence, which honestly, I prefer. I poked through a milk crate full of vinyl records and made small talk about the weather. He eventually told me his name was Rick. Said he'd just cleared out some storage and was looking to downsize. His words felt rehearsed, like a phrase he'd used too many times. Still, it wasn't anything weird enough to raise a red flag. I asked how long he'd lived here, and he hesitated just a beat too long before saying, "Oh, couple months." Something about the way he said it made me think he wasn't a talker, so I didn't press. I figured maybe he was renting the place. People drift in and out of towns like this all the time. I just picked up an old Polaroid camera, debating if it was worth $10, when I heard a loud thud come from inside the house. It was followed by muffled voices, one shouting, the other panicked. My head jerked up, and Rick froze. For a split second, he looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then, like he remembered I was standing there, he forced out a quick laugh and muttered something about his roommate being clumsy. I didn't move. The air around us suddenly felt heavy, like the kind of silence that waits for a decision. And then, before either of us could say another word, the front door slammed open and someone came tearing out of the house barefoot, eyes wide, bleeding from the lip. The guy who ran out looked maybe 20. No shirt, just jeans and a busted-up belt. He didn't stop or even glance at me. He sprinted straight past the yard sale table and down the gravel driveway like his life depended on it. I just stood there frozen, still holding that damn Polaroid in my hand. Rick didn't chase him, didn't shout, didn't even flinch. He just slowly turned his head and watched the kid disappear down the road, then looked back at me. His mouth opened like he wanted to explain, but no words came out. That silence between us felt like it lasted a full minute. Then he said, in the most forced, dry tone I've ever heard, "He's got some issues." I didn't respond. My stomach was twisted into a knot, and all my instincts were screaming at me to leave. But part of me, maybe the stubborn part that didn't want to seem paranoid or rude, stayed put. I told myself maybe they'd had a fight, or the guy was high, or maybe I'd just walked in on something awkward. I tried to set the camera back on the table, but my hand was trembling a little. Rick picked up a coffee mug from the table and started examining it like nothing had happened. He didn't look at me. Didn't say another word. And that's when I noticed the corner of a mattress just barely visible through the front door, sitting directly on the living room floor. No frame, no sheets, just a mattress with a brown stain on one end. I don't know why that detail hit me so hard, but it did. Something about that stain, and the way the blinds inside were all crooked and torn, like someone had been squatting there. I started piecing things together in my head. The cheap sale items, the weird hesitation when I asked about how long he'd lived there, the guy bolting out with blood on his face. I backed up a step. Rick finally looked up at me again, and this time, his expression had changed. He wasn't trying to play it cool anymore. His eyes narrowed and he tilted his head slightly, like he was gauging how much I'd seen, and what I might do with that. Muttered something like, "All right, I think I'm gonna head out," trying to keep my voice even. He didn't say a word, just watched me as I walked backwards toward my car, never turning my back to him. I got in, locked the doors immediately, and pulled out of the driveway way too fast, my tires kicking up dust and pebbles. As I turned back onto the road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Rick was still standing there by the folding table, staring at me. The smile he gave me as I drove away didn't reach his eyes. It looked like a threat wrapped in politeness. I didn't go straight to lunch. I parked in a Dollar General lot a few miles up the road and just sat there with the engine running, trying to calm myself down. I kept thinking about that barefoot guy, his busted lip, the panic in his eyes, and Rick with his fake calm and that weird shift in demeanor the second things stopped going his way. I debated calling the cops, but what was I even going to say? "Hi, I think a guy sold me a broken camera in front of a stolen house?" It sounded ridiculous, but the longer I sat there, the more I knew I couldn't just forget about it. Something had definitely been wrong. I ended up driving to the police station in Fairview and asked to speak with someone about a possible squatting situation. I didn't go into full detail. I just said I'd been to a yard sale where a man seemed to be living in a house that didn't look like it belonged to him. I gave them the address as best as I could remember it. The officer I spoke to was polite, but didn't seem especially urgent. He said they'd send someone out to take a look. I figured that would be the end of it. But 2 days later, I got a call. The same officer told me they'd gone to the house and discovered it had been vacant for nearly 6 months. The owners lived out of state and had been trying to sell it. Someone had broken in through the back door and had been staying there illegally. No power, no running water, just mattresses, stolen items, and what they described as a makeshift inventory of belongings in the living room. They didn't go into details, but the officer thanked me for the tip and mentioned they were investigating further. When I asked if the man had been arrested, he hesitated and said, "He was gone by the time we got there." I don't know what happened to the barefoot guy. I don't know if Rick even was his real name. But the more I think about it, the more I realize how easily that day could have gone sideways. I walked straight into someone else's mess. Someone who clearly had something to hide, maybe worse. That whole stretch of time plays back in my head sometimes, like a loop. The fake smile, the blood, the mattress, and the silence. How quiet it got right before everything snapped. Like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for someone to notice. Now, I don't stop at yard sales on back roads anymore. Doesn't matter how good the deals are. I still find myself scanning porches when I drive through places like that, half expecting to see someone standing too still, watching. And every now and then, when I think I've shaken it off, I'll catch a glimpse in my mirror, a memory, a face, maybe just paranoia, and wonder how close I really was to becoming part of whatever that guy was running from. It was a hot Saturday in early July, and I was helping my aunt run a yard sale in front of her place on Cherrywood Drive. She'd just retired and was clearing out decades of clutter, and I'd offered to organize the tables, handle the change box, that kind of thing. I wasn't a garage sale person, really, but there was something oddly therapeutic about laying everything out on tarps and haggling over rusty toasters and mismatched mugs. We'd been out since 7 a.m. And by 9:30, the street was already peppered with regulars. Older couples, kids with sticky fingers, the usual early birds. That's when I noticed a man standing across the street, not shopping, just watching. He looked like he'd just stepped out of a moving truck, jeans with paint smudges, a loose black tee, work gloves stuffed in his back pocket. Mid to late 30s, maybe. He had this high and tight haircut, almost military style, and the kind of posture that made you think he was used to lifting heavy stuff. Eventually, he walked over, hands in his pockets, and smiled in this overly casual way. "You've got some good stuff out here," he said, then added, "Actually, I'm moving out this week. Got a garage full of things I'm not taking. Thought maybe you'd want a few to sell. I can drop them off." It wasn't that strange of an offer. People sometimes donated items mid-sale, but there was a tension in the way he said it, a little too rehearsed. I told him my aunt was mostly trying to get rid of her own stuff, not add more, but he grinned and said, "No pressure, just figured I'd offer. If you've got 10 minutes, I could use a hand loading a couple boxes." He glanced over his shoulder, then added, "I'm just on Danner Street, 2 blocks up." Before I could respond, he popped open his backpack and showed me a few things. A signed baseball in a clear case, an old Polaroid camera, a couple of sealed video games still in shrink wrap. "Not junk," he said. "Promise." I don't know why I agreed. Maybe it was the way he showed me those items first, like he was proving himself. Maybe I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid. Either way, I asked my aunt if I could take a quick break, and she nodded without really looking. His car was parked just around the corner, a silver Nissan Rogue with the back seats folded down. Clean. No clutter, no weird smells, no red flags. I kept checking my phone as we drove, partly out of habit, partly for peace of mind. We turned onto Danner and pulled into the driveway of a white single-story rental with an overgrown lawn and a crooked mailbox leaning toward the street. He unlocked the front door with a key that stuck a little, then held it open for me, gesturing toward the living room. The air inside was stale, dry, like no one had opened a window in weeks. There were boxes stacked neatly by the hallway, all labeled in Sharpie. Books, kitchen DVDs. He waved toward them and said, "Those 3, just need to get them in the car." I bent down, grabbed the first one, and nearly fell backward. It was light, too light. I picked up the second box and shook it a little. Empty. Not just light. Actually, empty. My pulse kicked up, but I tried to play it cool. "These aren't packed yet," I said, standing upright. He didn't answer right away. He just smiled like I'd told a joke he didn't quite get. Then he stepped past me and shut the door behind us with this soft click. I didn't hear the lock at first, but I saw the motion of his hand turning it. That sound, metal sliding into place, snapped me out of whatever daze I was in. I asked, "Why are the boxes empty?" more firmly this time. He shrugged and his expression changed. Not angry, just flat, like a light behind his eyes had gone out. He moved closer. I stepped back. There was this thin hallway behind me, but no clear exit in sight. I thought about running for the door, but he was between me and it now, hands lowered but tense. "You said you needed help loading," I managed, keeping my voice steady. He laughed, or a single dry chuckle, then said, "Yeah, guess I did." That's when it sank in. He didn't bring me here for help. The boxes were bait. The collectibles were bait. There was never any plan to donate anything. I scanned the room for a weapon, anything, a chair, a lamp, even a pen. That's when I saw the ceramic lamp on a small table by the window. It was ugly, thick base, big shade, heavy enough. I didn't wait. I lunged for the lamp, gripped it with both hands, and turned just as he moved toward me. I don't know if I yelled or not. Everything in that second felt like it happened underwater. The ceramic cracked loudly against the side of his head and he stumbled sideways, catching himself against the wall. I didn't look back. I ran. Fumbled with the lock for what felt like hours before it clicked open, and I was outside, sprinting barefoot down the driveway. I'd kicked off my sandals earlier, and didn't even realize until the hot pavement burned into my soles. I didn't stop until I reached a neighbor's front lawn, banging on their door and yelling for help. An older woman answered, confused, and I told her to call the police. I gave them the address, as best I could remember it, and they arrived 10 minutes later. I expected them to cuff the guy, drag him out, maybe even ask me to ID him. But when we got back to the house, it was empty. The door was unlocked. No boxes, no lamp, no man. Nothing but dust and silence. And then one of the officers said something I'll never forget. "This property's been vacant since early June. No one's supposed to be here." I just stood there on the porch, staring past the officer into the living room I had just escaped from. It was the same house, same crooked blinds, same wall stain near the hallway, but it looked abandoned, not freshly, like it had been ignored for weeks. There were no boxes now, no smell of closed-up air, no busted lamp on the floor. The officer kept asking me if I was sure this was the house, and I kept nodding. He even showed me the property record on his phone. The last tenant had moved out a month earlier. The place was in limbo, waiting to be cleaned and listed. No one was supposed to have keys. They took my statement, wrote everything down, even had me walk through what happened again and again. I gave them every detail I could remember: his haircut, his voice, the signed baseball. I knew they didn't think I was making it up, but I could see it in their eyes. None of it made sense. No one matching his description was seen in the area that day. There were no fingerprints. No neighbors had noticed anyone coming or going from that house in weeks. When I asked about security footage on the street, they told me only one nearby home had a working door cam, and it hadn't picked up anything. Just me walking up the driveway alone, then sprinting away 6 minutes later barefoot and panicked. I started having trouble sleeping after that. Every night I'd hear that click of the lock in my head again. I started checking my own doors 3-4 times before bed. I even started carrying pepper spray, which I'd never done before. And I haven't helped anyone move since. Not friends, not family, definitely not strangers. I think what rattled me the most wasn't what happened inside the house. It was everything after. How clean it all vanished. No evidence, no trace, like he knew exactly what he was doing. Like he'd done it before. Or worse, like he was planning to do it again. Weeks later, I drove past that house again on a whim. There was a for rent sign staked in the front yard now, and the lawn had been trimmed. The windows looked different, newer blinds, fresh paint around the frames. I didn't stop the car, I just kept driving. But I noticed something as I turned the corner at the end of the street. Parked halfway down the block, facing the other way, was a silver Nissan Rogue. No dents, no plates, just sitting there, clean and still. I didn't slow down. I didn't look twice. I haven't been back to Cherrywood Drive since. We'd been living in that house on Evergreen Drive for about a year when it happened. It was a one-story, 70s-style place with this weird sunken living room and a laundry room that always smelled faintly like metal and dust, no matter how much bleach I used. My husband, Pete, and I had finally decided to clear out the clutter from the garage. Boxes we hadn't touched since we moved from Michigan, and we figured a Saturday garage sale was the way to go. It ended up being way busier than we expected. I don't know if it was the neighborhood Facebook post or the handmade signs we stapled to every pole in a 3-mile radius, but cars were parked all up and down the street like it was a block party. From 7 a.m. until close to 3 p.m., we had this steady stream of people combing through our stuff. Old tools, vintage mugs, a busted toaster someone still bought for $2. I remember this one guy asked way too many questions about a snow globe from Wisconsin, like he was inspecting it for fingerprints or something. It was exhausting, but we made just over $600 by the end of the day. Pete joked that we should host one every month. After we packed everything up, we locked the garage, shut the side gate, and ordered Thai food. I remember we were both too tired to talk much, just Netflix and the occasional slurp of noodles. Around 10 p.m., Pete went out to take the recycling to the bins near the laundry room door. The lights in there were still on. I must have forgotten to turn them off after tossing in some rags used during cleanup. I heard the laundry door click open and then this short pause. Not long, just a beat. Then he called out to me, real calm but flat, like he didn't want to scare me or himself. "Babe, can you come here for a second?" I remember how carefully he said it. Like he already knew something was wrong but was trying not to make it real by saying it out loud. I walked down the short hallway in my socks, trying to make sense of his tone. When I turned into the laundry room, Pete was just standing there, completely still, staring past the washer toward the shelves that lined the far wall. That's when I saw him. A man, barefoot, silent, crouched so tightly between two metal shelving units that I could barely understand how he got himself wedged in like that. He was facing us, his chin nearly touching his knees, and his eyes were wide open, not blinking, just staring. His clothes were dusty, too light for the weather, and I swear his left sock was completely soaked in something dark. He didn't move. He didn't speak. It was like he was waiting for someone to say a password. Pete stepped in front of me almost instinctively, like his body just reacted before his brain could. We didn't say a word for a few seconds. None of us did. I could hear the washer ticking as it cooled, and the sound of the porch light buzzing just outside the small window above the sink. The man didn't flinch. He wasn't hiding his face or trying to escape. He wasn't even trembling. I remember that weird, almost unbearable stillness in the room. Like the second you see a wild animal too close and you know that any sudden movement could make something awful happen. But the thing is, he didn't seem scared of us. If anything, it was the other way around. Pete asked him quietly, "Hey, do you need help?" No response. "Did you get locked in here or something?" Still nothing. Not even a shift in posture. The guy's chest moved with shallow, slow breaths, but his expression didn't change. It was like we were watching a mannequin that someone had forgotten to assemble all the way. Pete moved a little closer, not all the way, just halfway between the door and the shelves. "You're not supposed to be here, man," he said. "You need to come out." And then, finally, the man blinked. Just once. But he didn't speak, didn't try to explain himself. I was gripping the doorframe so hard my fingers started to ache. My mind was trying to race through possibilities. Mental illness, drug use, some guy who got disoriented during the sale. But none of it felt right. I remembered exactly how the day had ended. We cleaned everything up, walked the driveway together, locked every door. There was no moment where someone could have just slipped in without being noticed. And besides, who hides barefoot in a laundry room for nearly 7 hours without making a single sound? There weren't any food wrappers, no water bottles, nothing around him except a fallen rag and a can of Lysol. Pete didn't want to escalate it, so he asked me to grab his phone. I backed away down the hall and dialed 911 before I even made it to the living room. I couldn't hear what Pete was saying after that, but when I peeked back down the hall a few seconds later, he was still keeping a cautious distance. And the man hadn't moved, not an inch. Still wedged there, like he'd been placed in that spot on purpose. Like a puppet waiting for someone to pull the strings, the dispatcher told me to stay on the line and not approach. I asked if we should leave the house. She said yes. We stepped out the front door and waited in the driveway. It felt unreal, standing there under that flickering street lamp while our laundry room held a stranger who hadn't said a single word. I could hear my own heartbeat louder than anything else. A neighbor from across the street came out and asked if everything was okay. Pete just said, "We had a trespasser," and the guy gave a nod like he understood, but I could tell he didn't. I don't think anyone really could have. The patrol car showed up maybe 10 minutes later, sirens off, just a slow roll into the cul-de-sac. 2 officers got out. One of them asked if he was armed. Pete said he didn't think so. The cops went in with flashlights drawn, hands hovering near their holsters. We stood on the curb and watched the house swallow them whole. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then we heard one of them call out, "Sir, can you hear me?" Another pause. "Can you move?" Still silence. Then a shuffle, like something being dragged across the linoleum. A few minutes later, they brought him out. He wasn't fighting, wasn't shouting, just walking, barefoot, with his head slightly tilted like he was trying to hear something in the distance. The taller officer held his arm gently, like you would a sleepwalker. I remember he looked up at the sky as they walked him out, like he'd forgotten where he was. They didn't cuff him. That's what I keep thinking about. They didn't cuff him. One officer told us they were taking him in for medical evaluation. When I asked if they found anything on him, they said no. No ID, no phone, not even lint in his pockets. We never found out how he got in. The back door was locked from the inside, and the only windows in the laundry room are the narrow kind you can't climb through. For days after, I checked the shelves obsessively, like he might have left something behind. A clue, a scrap of clothing, a name. But there was nothing. Just the faint outline of where his bare heel had rested on the dusty floor. It's been almost 6 months now. We installed motion lights, a deadbolt on the laundry door, even a little camera above the back porch, but I still hesitate every time I open that door. I still think about the way he looked at us without blinking, crouched like he was waiting for someone else to show up. Not us, someone else. And I don't think he was trying to rob us. I don't even think he wanted anything from us. It was like we interrupted something, like we stepped into the middle of a scene that wasn't meant for us to see. And the worst part is, sometimes I wonder if the real reason he never spoke is because the person he was waiting for just never came. If you'd told me a year ago that hosting a garage sale could end up being the creepiest day of my life, I'd have laughed. But that Saturday in late May still sticks with me. I live in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of Indianapolis, in an old split-level ranch that belonged to my mom before she downsized. The kind of place where people wave from their porches and nothing dramatic ever happens. I'd just gotten through a messy divorce, and the garage sale was my way of clearing out everything that reminded me of my ex. Wedding gifts, odd furniture, a few power tools I never learned how to use. My friends Megan and Laura came over to help, and we made a whole event out of it, blasting 90s playlists and drinking way too much lemonade. By noon, the front yard looked like a pop-up thrift shop. Kids on bikes circled the driveway, and there was a steady flow of neighbors and strangers, some chatting, some just silently picking through boxes. I kept my own purse, a tan Coach knockoff, with a weird little pine cone keychain my son made in 2nd grade, tucked right behind the folding table where I was handling the money. I didn't think twice about it. Megan kept an eye on the cash box, Laura fielded questions about prices, and I floated between the two, answering questions about kitchen gadgets and trying not to get sunburned. Things got hectic right after 1 o'clock. Out of nowhere, a small crowd formed around the table, all talking at once about a set of Pyrex dishes and a dusty lamp that looked like it belonged in a motel. In the chaos, I remember Laura laughing at some guy's joke about the lamp, Megan waving at a woman she recognized from work, and this short, middle-aged man with a faded John Deere cap hovering a little too close. At some point, a gust of wind knocked over a cardboard sign, and everyone scrambled to pick it up. That's when I lost track of the purse. But in the middle of all that, it didn't even cross my mind to check for it. By late afternoon, when the last neighbor wandered off with an old blender, I realized my purse was gone. I felt this hot jolt of annoyance, thinking I must have shoved it under a box or left it inside by mistake. Megan and Laura helped me tear the place apart, checking behind every crate and underneath the card table, but it was just gone. All I could do was sit down on the porch steps, trying to convince myself I'd just misplaced it, even though deep down I knew someone must have grabbed it during the busiest part of the day. That evening, after Megan and Laura left, I started the dull task of canceling my cards and changing passwords. My phone had been in my back pocket all day, but losing my purse was still a huge headache. There were small things in there that no bank could replace. A photo strip of me and my son making silly faces at the state fair, the only lipstick shade that makes me look awake, and my mom's old pharmacy discount card, brittle with age. I was tired, irritated, and honestly embarrassed that I'd let something so personal get swiped right out from under my nose. After double-checking every closet and drawer, I finally slumped on the couch with my laptop, just hoping for some distraction. Scrolling mindlessly through Facebook Marketplace, I was half looking for a cheap bookshelf when something snagged my attention. A listing had popped up less than an hour ago. Tan handbag, gently used, with a blurry photo taken in someone's dim hallway. My eyes locked onto the pine cone keychain hanging from the zipper, unmistakable even in the crappy picture. At first, I thought it had to be some wild coincidence. Maybe there were dozens of purses like mine floating around the city. But the knot in my stomach tightened when I realized the seller's profile picture was just a blurry photo of a dog, no name, and almost no other activity. The more I stared at the listing, the more certain I became. That was my purse. There was even a sticker from a dentist appointment stuck inside the front pocket, barely visible in the second photo. I sat there for a few seconds, my hands actually shaking. I didn't want to message the seller from my own account. It felt too personal, too exposed. Instead, I texted my cousin Amber and asked if she'd do me a weird favor. Within minutes, she sent a message to the seller, pretending to be interested in picking up the bag. The seller responded fast, sending over an address that made my heart thud. It was just 5 houses down, on the same side of the street. The little blue house with plastic flamingos in the yard, a place I'd walked past 100 times. Suddenly, the neighborhood didn't feel so safe or familiar anymore. I peered through the blinds at dusk, every porch light on the block looking a little colder than usual. Amber agreed to swing by the next morning, and I barely slept that night. Every time a car door slammed or someone's dog barked, I found myself listening hard, heart hammering. At dawn, I watched Amber park a few houses down just out of sight. She walked up to the blue house like she belonged there, phone in hand, ready to record if things got weird. I waited by my window, palms sweating, hoping nobody would recognize her as my cousin. A heavy-set woman in a faded cardigan answered the door. She looked older than I expected, with gray hair pulled into a lopsided bun, and a way of squinting at Amber like she was trying to see through a fog. Amber made small talk, complimented the garden flamingos, and handed over the cash. The woman barely said a word. The whole thing took less than 2 minutes. As Amber walked back toward her car, she glanced at the purse, then shot me a text. "Got it. This is definitely yours." I felt a mix of relief and creeping unease. When I opened the bag back at my place, everything was still there, except for the cash and one of the photos. The pinecone keychain was twisted tight, like someone had fidgeted with it for hours. The smell was different too, a weird sharp scent I couldn't place. Later that afternoon, I decided to walk past the blue house, just to see if anyone was watching. The flamingos were still there, but the curtains were drawn tight in every window, even though it was a bright sunny day. I slowed down when I reached their mailbox, pretending to tie my shoe, but I didn't see or hear anyone inside. The woman never looked out, never acknowledged me or anyone else on the street. The whole block felt quieter than usual, like everyone was waiting for something to happen. I never saw the woman again. A couple of weeks later, a moving truck showed up in front of the blue house, and by the end of the day, the place was empty except for a broken lawn chair and one sad flamingo lying on its side. I still don't know why she took my purse or why she bothered to sell it so close to home. Sometimes I think about the missing photo and whether she kept it or just threw it away. Now, whenever I set something down, even for a second, I keep one eye on it. I guess that's just what happens after a day like that.